Hello everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at Angels of Darkness, written by Gav Torp. Now Gav Torp wrote Angels of Darkness after he finished the Last Chancer series. So as far to my knowledge, this is his fourth book he's written for the Black Library. And I'm not purposely trying to do old books from over 10 years ago. I think it was over 10 years ago. I do reviews on the books I find at the discount bookstore. And lucky for me, Angels of Darkness was there. And this book claims to uncover the dark secrets that the Dark Angels are hiding. And when I was done with this book, I did read a few other people's reviews on it. And one Dark Angel fan review that I found did say that he already knew most of the secrets that were in the book. Now he said most of those secrets. You see, before I read this book, I didn't know anything about the Dark Angels. And I think it does a very good job on explaining to you what the Dark Angels are all about, what their secrets are. What kind of drives the Dark Angels to do what they do? What motivates them? And most importantly, it gives you a lot of fluff on the Dark Angels. And you know how much I just love fluff. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's start off this book by talking about the characters. The first main character, I believe you pronounce his name, Boreas. And he's a chaplain!
Chaplain!
That's right. And not just any chaplain, he's an interrogator chaplain, which is pretty much like a regular chaplain, except if you know about the Dark Angels, they tend to interrogate and torture fallen angels, but you know what, we'll get into that later. And he's pretty much half the book right there. The other half you see from the other main character, Astalan. And for the most part, he's going to be the interrogatee. Interrogated? The guy, he's pretty much being interrogated. And I can't say too much more on the characters without going into the premise, so let's just go right into that. Now the premise is Astalan is supposedly a fallen angel, and he was part of the original Dark Angels. Now the thing with the Dark Angels, which you need to know, which is explained in the book, but for this review's sake, I'm going to have to explain it to you anyway. During the Horus Heresy, which was the big civil war that happened with the Space Marines early in this universe, the Dark Angels had their own little civil war. And the ones that turned against the Emperor are considered the fallen angels. Now before those fallen angels could have all been destroyed, they were sucked into a warp storm. And if you're not sure what a warp storm is, it's pretty much a tear in time and space that leads into another dimension that's ruled by the Chaos Gods. So the main thing with the Dark Angels is that they feel this great shame because half of their chapter betrayed them. So now they're on the hunt for all the fallen angels. And that's pretty much priority number one. Now, Astalan is one of those fallen angels that was part of the civil war against the rest of this chapter. And of course, he gets sucked into that warp storm, but then he appears like centuries later. And he's eventually discovered by some Dark Angels, and he's captured, and he's being interrogated. And Boreas, he's the interrogator. He's trying to discover why Astalan did what he did so many centuries ago, or if he's really one of the original Space Marines from so many centuries ago. And we're told a lot of this through flashbacks, because there's a second part of the story, which takes place a few decades after that interrogation. And we keep switching back and forth between the present, or at least the present in the book, and back to that interrogation. Now, I know I'm sounding all over the place on this, but I am doing my best not to spoil this for you, because this book is just glorious in how much fluff it just fed me. Excuse me. So let's just go right into the story and start from the beginning. Now Boreas, the chaplain, is with a squad of Dark Angels, and they're planet hopping trying to recruit for their chapter. And it's going all fine. You get to see the recruiting process they have. And it's in those events where they really start on character development in Boreas and some of his other squad members. And then, of course, they return to the fortress that they're stationed at. And I know I'm not sounding very excited about this, because really it's these scenes at the beginning that's just kind of starting up the characters. It's really trying to develop them out. You learn a little bit more about the Dark Angels. And it's fine. I like it. But what I'm really more interested in is those flashbacks when he goes to the interrogation. Now, when he goes to the flashback, you find out what happened to Astalan. Well, what supposedly happened to Astalan. You see, Astalan, when he came out of the warp, he had no idea what was going on, because it was almost like an instant for him. Because time works differently in the warp. So he's in this universe, times have changed, chapters have changed, the way the Space Marines worked have changed. And he doesn't really seem like the typical traitor Marine. He's still all for the Emperor and humanity, but he's kind of like the old man set in his ways. Eventually, he ends up getting stuck on this one planet, an Imperial planet, but it's going through its own little civil war, kind of a revolution. And he begins to help out that planet with the revolution, trying to stop the revolution. But then he starts getting a little bit more control and more control. You see, he's not really liking the church, and the church is kind of using him. But he realizes that if this planet's going to find peace, he's going to have to start doing some martial law, military rule. He takes over, and for better or worse, he pretty much does have peace on the planet, but it's underneath an iron fist. But through his words, you find out he's not really an evil kind of person. It's the universe that changed that makes him look like he's evil. And then when he starts talking about how things were back when the Emperor was still around, even now how the chapter is different over from back in his day, and it just keeps going on why the civil war between the Dark Angels happened, and oh my god, more fluff. I wonder how much sugar is in this thing. You see, he starts talking about why the revolution happened. You see, there was the Primarch of the Dark Angels called Lionel Johnson. Johnson. And he had sort of like a father figure, kind of best friend, guy that hung out with him called Luther. And Luther was the guy that pretty much started the entire war against Lionel Johnson. And it's through the interrogation with Aslan that you find out why that happened. Or supposedly why that happened. I mean, because this guy could be lying for all you know, but I kind of get the feeling that he's not. And you find out that things aren't really so black and white. And while in the history of the Warhammer universe, you think that Luther was the really big bad guy, but then you start thinking maybe it wasn't the way history books have written him. And it's going through that interrogation that I really love, trying to find out the secrets. But then we kept going back to the present time and what's going on with the chaplain now. And then you start seeing that some of the things that Aslan was talking about with the changes of the chapter, it's really a lot more accurate than the chaplain really realized. Because the chapter's been holding so many secrets, even amongst themselves. See, in the present time, he and his squad is kind of stationed on this one fortress monastery kind of thing, on this one planet kind of out of the way, and they're helping out the Imperial Guard there. And the Imperial Guard is having trouble with orcs, which is why, 6 Space Marines are helping out against the entire orc army. I guess they're awesome. But then you find out that those secrets start kind of digging their own grave. And while he's kind of like battling with what's going on in the present time, and the revolution that's kind of starting on that one planet, and why it's going on, and you start seeing how the interrogation actually kind of fits with what's going on. You kind of see the conversation that was going on with the interrogation and how that kind of relates with what's going on with the Dark Angels. Oh man, I think I'm coming down. And this book does a really good job, in my opinion, on... Oh, just give me a second. On supposedly revealing these dark secrets that some of the Dark Angels didn't even know they were hiding. In the dialogue between Aslan and Boreas, the chaplain...
Chaplain!
I shouldn't have said that so loud. Is, I think, the greatest part of this book. Now, if you're a Dark Angels fan, chances are you might have already read this. If not, then I highly recommend it if you're a Dark Angels fan. If you're not a Dark Angels fan, I still think you should read this. If you're new to the series, this book does a really good job on easing you in to the Dark Angels chapter and their history and what happened. I went into this book with no foreknowledge of the Dark Angels aside from the fact that they were a Space Marine chapter. And I came out with so much more. So I can't really do a book punch to this one since I like it so much. Maybe a book fist bump? Yeah, fist bump. Did you guys see that? Anyway. Wonder what will happen if I mix my coffee with my fluff. Oh, that's delicious. Alright. Well, anyway, that's my... Ooh. That's...